Hello and welcome to Cataylze Music Academy. My name is Zaak Kerstetter and I'm an Ableton Certified Trainer. And for today's quick tip, I want to talk a little bit about Wavetable, specifically the Wavetable effects, which is a feature that I think is often overlooked and really can add a lot of dynamics and interesting motion and movement to whatever sound you're making inside Wavetable, especially for kind of like weird, gnarly bass sound design. So if you've used Wavetable at all, you're probably familiar with modulating things like the wavetable position to move it up and down with something like an LFO. So if I apply an LFO, it's gonna move up and down like that, which sounds pretty cool. But I can also do all kinds of interesting effects to make it move in different directions besides just up and down. And that can be accessed down here within our effects controls. So there's three kinds of effects. There's FM, classic, and modern. Each one of these has two parameters that goes with it, and they're different for each one of these effects. So let's go ahead and let's pick a more kind of interesting wavetable. And let's start with modern, because this is probably the one I use the most. So there's two effects in the modern section. There is warp, which if I turn this up, it's going to start stretching my waveform to the right, or sorry, to the left, which sounds like that. Sounds pretty cool. And if you go into negative values, it moves it to the right, like that. So if I were to apply some modulation within my matrix, I can start making this move left and right. And then we can also add some modulation on the position to also make it move up and down. Sounds a little crazy. Can be pretty awesome though. So that's the warp. We also have things like fold. So fold is going to move it towards the middle, and then once it hits the middle, it's going to mirror it out on either side, which sounds like this. Let's try a little lower octave. Which is pretty cool. So again, we can apply an LFO to that and see what happens. Let's actually slow our LFO down a little bit. It's a little fast. Like that. Get, again, really cool sounds with very, very little effort. That's why I really like these effects. Keep in mind that a lot of times if these effects are set to 0 and you apply an LFO to it, it doesn't do anything because it doesn't have any amount to work with. So you have to turn it up a little bit in order to actually make this work. So that's modern, really, really handy. You use it all the time. It's great for getting more out of each one of your wavetables. The next one we'll take a look at is going to be classic, which has two options. Pulse width, which is a lot like warp. If you turn this up, it's going to move it to the right, but instead of stretching it, it's just going to add like blank space over here. And if you go into negative values, it goes the other direction. And then we also have sync, which is just going to make it repeat. So it's going to be just the same thing over and over again. Which is pretty cool. And then lastly, we have FM, which has two controls, tune and amount. Tune will not do anything if amount is set to 0. So you have to turn up amount first. Amount sounds really awesome. It's going to apply FM synthesis to itself. Sounds really gnarly, really fun to play around with. And if I turn this up and then I turn tune up, sounds pretty crazy. Keep in mind that tune is the only one of these effects that will actually change the pitch of your sound. So if you turn it up a little bit, it will actually move this out of key. So watch out for that, unless you turn it to 100%, in which case it goes back to the original note. The only other thing that you need to be aware of when using these effects is you can only use one of these effect layers at a time. So if you have amount turned up to 30% on FM and you switch to classic, you no longer get the FM. You can only use one at a time, which is unfortunate. This also applies for the modulation. So if I apply modulation to my sync control like this, and then I switch to FM, this modulation no longer applies to that sync control, but it does apply to the FM amount. So it's still doing something. It's still applying to the second one of these two parameters. Even though this still says oscillator 1 sync, this is now controlling oscillator 1 FM amount. So watch out for that. Even if you change effects, the name within your matrix stays the same, but it either applies to parameter number 1 or parameter number 2. So like I said, this is a really fun, easy way just to go in and get a lot of diversity of sound out of almost any waveform. just by going through these. So I'm not going to show you any specific examples about how to program this. It's really up to you just to be creative and go nuts with it. Have some fun, see what you can get. And this is a great way if you're feeling a little bit bored by some of the wavetable options that you have, you can just get a lot more out of each one of the wavetables that already exist within the Wavetable synth. So that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed watching that. Hopefully it's useful for you. If you're an advanced Wavetable user, that's probably nothing new. But if you're just getting started with sound design with Wavetable, this is a really key component to just getting a little bit more diversity in your sound design and just getting some really kind of nasty, gnarly motion and movement within your sound. So if you enjoyed watching the video, please subscribe to the channel. We're gonna have a lot more of these quick tips coming out for you. And again, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you soon.